Today I am joined by someone mad enough, bad enough, and frankly courageous enough to go into the highly competitive world of brewing beer. I'm joined by one half of the London Beer Factory, that's the londonbeerfactory.com, Ed Cotton, aka Rotten Cotton, and a man I've known for a little bit of time. So Ed, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Marcus.
It's
Very
a pleasure.
Kind to be on.
It's a pleasure, Treasure. I've got to start by asking you, how easy is it to brew beer? Because when I see these enormous facilities and all the rest of it, it looks absolutely bonkers to me.
I mean, to answer your question shortly, it's pretty difficult and requires a lot of money.
Can I ask you something? We'll come on to how you came onto this bonkers idea in a minute. But when you first started, did you have a clue what you were doing?
I mean, if the truth be told, neither of us had any idea whatsoever how to brew beer. All we knew,
How to drink it.
all we knew was how to drink it, and we knew that we liked beer.
Yeah.
And I think those are pretty good starting points.
They do say follow your passions.
They say follow your passions, and I started in a pub in Liverpool Street in the City of London with a really, really mad idea to start a brewery. I mean, to be fair, when we started back in March, or came up with the idea in March 2013, craft beer was, I would say, in the UK, still in its infancy then. There were about, to put it into context, we were probably craft brewery number 25 in London.
Yeah, okay.
And obviously a few have fallen by the wayside since then. And there's probably now about 100 of varying sizes.
But you didn't come to it completely new, because I think your dad was involved in the drinks industry at some point.
Yes.
Some could say that two of you were born to brew it. I've been waiting to put that one in there, but yeah, you can cut it. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, my father's always been an entrepreneur, and so obviously I grew up with that, the highs and the lows of being in a family of an entrepreneur. You know, it has a mad idea. Some work, some don't work, and thankfully for my father, one of those ideas really worked. So I've seen how difficult it is, and
you thought, oh, I fancy that.
I thought, well, I think fundamentally what it is with a lot of people, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs. I mean, I did a 9-to-5 job for 12 years before starting this, and you kind of think to yourself, well, is this what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? There are more interesting things out there. And starting a business was always something that my brother and I wanted to do. Yeah. Not necessarily together, but he has a different skill set to me. And brewing beer was something that we thought was fun. And from the outside, it does look like fun. You know, you can bring your mates to the brewery you've set up, have a beer. I mean, the reality, which I'm sure we'll get into, is very different. But yeah, so I'm from a family of entrepreneurs, I suppose, and it's something that I've always wanted to do, and we decided to take the plunge and quit the day job and then start this crazy journey. Yeah.
So talk me through it then. Obviously, you saw the kind of the opportunity in craft beer, but how did you initially get the business off the ground? Because I know you put in some of your own money and you also raised some as well, didn't you?
Yeah. So, which I mean, the easiest way to start a business is through the SEIS scheme, which the government launched, which is fantastic, and so we used that. My brother and I put in 50k each, which basically we were given that, inherited that from a great aunt who passed away, and we
thank you, Auntie.
Yeah, thank you, Auntie.
We miss you.
Well, we can raise a beer to her later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we thought, we'll put that in, but obviously that's not enough to to get you to the start gate for brewing beer. So we needed to raise 295k. So we had to go out and find other investors. I mean, that's hard in itself. I mean, fundamentally, most people go to friends and family first, which is what we did. A lot of people turn you down, and you're selling a story that, I mean, brewing beer is one of the oldest things in the world to do. But craft brewing was pretty new in the UK, and people like to be part of a brewery. It's quite a fun idea. You can bring your mates if you're an investor and have a beer with them. So we managed to raise the money, and that was just the beginning. I mean, all of these things. Thank God we were so naive when we went into it, because obviously we would never have done it if we like everybody says. But you've got this money, and then you've got to actually get the brewing equipment. You've got to find the site. You've got to install it. I mean, there's just so much to it.
Work out how to brew a beer.
I mean, how to
so you can sell something.
How to actually produce something that's vaguely drinkable.
Yeah.
So then we obviously started to install the equipment in January.
How did you even know what to buy? Did you have a consultant or something that you found that could help you, or were you kind of?
So we used a consultant, but all they did was source the brewing equipment for us.
Yeah.
And then obviously you've got to find somebody to install this. You've got to find somebody to do the drainage. You've got to find some. The problems just don't ever end. and they still are going.
And I assume
today.
Once it's all installed, you don't just press play.
I mean, if it was that easy, I mean, it does feel like everybody has a craft brewery right now. But,
well, you did. I remember because I drank some of the early beer, and you actually had a relatively good tasting beer quite quickly from memory.
I mean, it took about 6 months, I would say. So we had. I mean, the great thing with beer is you can't poison somebody with it, because it's been boiled. So. Okay. However bad it is, you're not going to kill somebody. So that's a good thing.
Right.
It may not taste very nice, but you're not going to kill somebody.
Might give them a hell of a hangover.
A hell of a hangover. Yeah. I mean, some of them were probably not quite the right ABV at the start, but or the alcohol content at the start. But I mean, we had 3 products that we went to market with, and these were real ales, so not kind of fizzy lager beer. And we realised fairly quickly the market was moving away from that style, more to kind of caked IPA, which is fizzy IPA, using hops from America. So we changed tack reasonably quickly, I would say, to producing more really hoppy American style beers.
Yeah.
And now that proved successful. But even like through the first year, I mean, with something like a manufacturing business, you're just burning cash all the time.
Well, also, I mean, because I can't compare, but I've obviously got businesses that are somewhat in manufacturing, but I've not. Well, actually, I have built our own factory for the gas facility, but only once I'd proven the concept. Originally, it was sort of, the gas was filled elsewhere and all the rest of it. But to have sort of done it from the get-go, because obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing, but you might have, I don't know, brewed it third party to begin with, kind of found a flavour, whatever, I don't know. But you've then got manufacturing, sales, marketing, your account, like there's just so much stuff that you have to encompass into, what is essentially a startup. And that's a huge amount of different skills that you have to find, and it's all got to kind of come together and work. So that's pretty ambitious.
Well, I mean, we started with just my brother and I, and then a brewer.
Yeah.
So 3 people. And as I said, I mean, we fundamentally, looking back at it now, had absolutely no idea what we were doing.
No one ever does, though, do they, really?
But obviously, as you say, it literally encompasses everything. You're literally brewing the beer, you're kegging it, you're then putting it in a van, you're taking it out, selling it. I mean, some of the first sales we did, we literally filled the van up with kegs of beer and just went to a pub and just said, it was a bit like Del Boy.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Would you be interested in some of the beers? Oh, yeah, great, we'd like some. Oh, I've got them in the back of the van, I'll bring them out now. Can you pay cash? Great, yeah.
Wow.
I mean...
It was that raw, like it was that kind of...
Well, you got to start somewhere.
No, yeah, I'm not criticising. I think that's great, but...
And obviously, you know, when you're doing it yourself, so you're manufacturing it yourself, what we didn't have to start with was a bottling line or a canning line.
Yeah.
We just had kegs of beer. So these pubs, they couldn't even taste the beer. So
yeah, because suppose you have to open the keg in order to give them the sample, right?
So they had to put the keg on to actually taste it.
So did you get situations where they put the keg on and they went, no thanks? And you're like,
I mean, we had so many. The keg wouldn't work. The beer was too fizzy. The beer was too flat. The beer was off. Everything. Can you come get the keg? Oh, we're not going to put this back on again. I mean, everything you can possibly imagine that goes wrong went wrong.
Yeah.
But the unfortunate thing is that obviously that's your reputation. But you start very small and local. So we literally started with the pub up the road. And then the next pub and the next pub and the next pub. And I mean, the best way is to build a local community and go from there.
I know that the very little I understand about beer, though, isn't it incredibly competitive to get on the keg? Because obviously you've got you've got Carling, Heineken, whatever, and they probably just pay, or they just give it so cheap that the pub can't.
Yeah,
they maybe have a choice to have one or two. I know now that a lot of these pubs have a lot more choice, but it's very hard to compete with the Coca-Colas of the beer world.
I mean, most pubs have 6 taps.
Yeah,
and as you say, Heineken or Molson Coors will come in and pay a lot of money to have their beer on those particular taps. So yeah, I mean, you've basically got a 1 in 2 shot of getting on the tap in a pub, and as I said, just in the local vicinity where when we started the brewery, there was another brewery that started up at exactly the same time, about a quarter of a mile down the road from us.
Yeah.
So the competition was fierce, but there was and there still is a big demand for a better quality style of beer.
Yeah.
So that's what you have going for you. And yeah, I mean, we literally, it was my job to go out there and just sell this product.
But you'd had some experience selling beer and things before?
Yeah, so I'd worked in wholesale in London, which, I mean, that definitely helped, so I'd been in London selling various alcoholic products for about 5 years previous to this. So that was very beneficial. But it's quite different when you're selling your own product.
Oh yeah, because it's incredibly emotional.
Yeah.
And if you're selling somebody else's product and they sip it and they go, oh, I don't like it. Yeah, cool. Next one is this one. When it's yours, you're like, you don't. What don't you like?
So what's wrong?
Yeah.
And you're like, that's a bit awkward.
Yeah.
And they say, well, what are you in the business? Oh, I'm the founder. Right. That's a real conversation stopper then.
Yeah, awkward. But so you started it with your brother, and then you both kind of split roles, right? Because you were very much kind of in the sales and he was the marketing.
So I was looking after the sales, the marketing, and the branding, and he was looking after the brewing and the finance side of it. And that worked quite well. That was quite an even split, and obviously then we had to employ staff to brew the beer, to keg it, and I mean, sometimes these brews would take 12 hours, so it's a long day.
And how often are you doing that? Is it like daily or like what?
So to start with, it was like twice a week.
Yeah.
And then obviously the more we scaled up, that was twice a day.
Twice a day?
Yeah, so we'd start at 6 a.m, finish at 2, and then the next shift of people would come in at 3 and go through till 10.
So I mean, you must have had quite a big demand for the beer then, if you were having to brew more and more and more.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we were quite fortunate that we obviously hit a wave in 2014 where people were really getting into craft beer, There were a lot of craft beer festivals going on. I suppose it was just a bit of a sweet spot of a time, and pubs were very open to putting different styles of beer on their taps. So we were able to scale up reasonably quickly. I mean, the problem is as you know, you need a lot of cash.
And people don't pay in that industry, because obviously I've got Husk as a business, so we sell to pubs and bars, and they don't pay. Big hotel chains, they don't pay, or they don't pay on time. Certainly, it's very difficult.
So cash flow is a killer for particularly for a manufacturing business, well, particularly a small business like this. You're selling to a pub and you're extending 30 days credit, and
which they see as 90.
Which they see as 90, or they just
if they're going to pay at all.
If they pay at all,
yeah.
I mean, we've had lots of bad debts, like every business. But what we did realise was that we had to put beer into cans. So cans were becoming big. And
Speaking of which, I'm just going to crack this open. Keep going.
That was the. I mean, that was definitely the turning point in our business. We went from just selling kegs of beer to a pub to actually then having beer in cans that we could sell off trade, so to bottle shops, to restaurants, to supermarkets. It opens up a whole other avenue of places to sell your product. I mean, and that comes with its own challenges, of course. You've then got to run a canning line. You've then got to employ people to do that. But that was a good thing. You want these challenges; they're important. So we got the cans going, and that was in 2016. So we've been going for 2 and a bit years.
Yeah.
And then we somehow managed to get a listing with Tesco supermarket nationally,
which is phenomenal, actually.
I mean, to put that into context, when we launched into Tesco, we were, I think, craft beer number 3. So you'd had Brewdog, Camden, or maybe 4, Vocation, and then us. So they had a very small range. And they turn around and they say, we'd like to put you in 2,500 stores. And you're thinking, crikey, I mean, we can barely brew enough beer to sell to the local pub down the road,
But you went, no, that's fine. We'll have it with you next week.
Of course we can do that. And you make it happen.
And so, did you actually get that larger listing from they didn't put you in 90 stores or whatever? Because traditionally, with for people that don't know or have not sold to supermarkets, it tends to work something a little bit like this. It takes you about 18 months to get in touch with a buyer and actually have a conversation. Maybe it takes you 6 months, 9 months, depends if you have the contacts, whatever. If they even show a hint of interest, their next range review is probably 1 or 2 years beyond that time. And typically when they eventually do agree to list you, they say, we'll trial you in 90 stores. But the problem with that is, if you're bringing out your new funky flavors of crisps or whatever, and then you say to people, go down to Tesco's to buy my product, well, if you're only in 1/20th or 1/40th of Tesco stores, people go down and they go, it wasn't there. So I suppose one of the things that's must have been great for you was that if you did, as you say, got this nationwide listing from the get-go, you did at least have like something to work with, where you could say to people, we're now in Tesco's. They go down and they say, oh yeah, London Beer Factory, here it is.
Yeah, I mean, so I sent an email in, I think it was November 2017, and I got a reply almost straight away, which is
I mean,
a lot of it is, it's all luck and timing. Right?
Yes, I suppose it's true.
They wanted to put more craft beers into their range. I just happened to email at the right time. They liked the look of the branding, the cans, and literally 3 months later, they were like, right, you need to start we're going to put you in 2,500 stores. We're going to be ordering in 2 months' time. You've got to be ready.
Chop, chop.
Chop, chop. And that was obviously panic stations. Then you're like, well, we instead of brewing once a day, it's twice a day. Then it's, can we brew 3 times a day?
And you're like, oh, and how does a can work?
Then it was like, well, we've got to source a canning line. We've got to pay for a canning line.
Yeah.
We've got to find a lot of staff. We've got to get more brewing vessels. Yeah, supermarkets are great. They give you incredible volume into the business. They don't necessarily give you, obviously, bottom line profit. But exposure to a wide market, there's nothing like Tesco. Nothing. Tesco have 5,000 stores. 5,000 stores.
It's a fair few, isn't it?
That is, it's just an incredible exposure for your product.
Yeah, and I suppose the great thing about that is if you then were to really push into the on-trade, and by on-trade we mean bars, pubs, hotels, and then off-trade being retail stores like Tesco's, Asda, is that obviously if someone... you're far more likely someone's going to pick up your can of beer in Tesco's to try it than they probably are to walk into a pub where they're going in to drink a beer, but suddenly they've got 20 different ones to choose from, and 4 of them are their favourites. And why would they spend their £5-6 on a pint trying something they're not too sure of? So it gives you a real opportunity to be seen, but also to be tasted, which in food is kind of what it's all about.
Yeah, look, they're taking a big risk as well. They have no idea if it's going to fly or not.
Yeah.
Tesco, to be honest, have been incredible. I haven't got a bad word to say against them, and I think for us, we've been with them for over 5 years now. It's been an amazing journey. So to give whatever brand it is the exposure like that is, just extraordinary.
Can I ask you now, though, because there are hundreds more craft breweries, it's obviously fiercely competitive. I imagine, I don't know, but I imagine now when you go back to whoever's buying now, because they also move the buyers around, so it's very difficult to build a relationship with anybody, and someone comes into the category and they might decide they love your product, or they might decide, actually, I don't like your product. So you're very much at their disposal if they suddenly decide, actually, we don't want this product anymore, or we want to put it from 2,200 stores into 5,000 stores. Now, if you have a new flavour or that sort of thing, I imagine, is it harder probably to try and get them to take something new from you than it perhaps was?
All supermarkets fundamentally what they're always looking for is something new on their shelf.
Yeah.
And when you go into a supermarket, you'll realise there are very few branded products out there.
Yeah.
The interesting thing with craft beer is, I suppose it's a bit like quite a lot of people have become craft beer connoisseurs, and they don't necessarily want to buy their craft beer from a supermarket. They want to go to a local bottle shop and discover it.
Yeah.
Which is fine. That's absolutely fine. But these supermarket buyers, what they need is new products on their shelves. So yes, it can be, when you've been there for a number of years, it's a bit more straightforward, because they trust that you've done a good job. What they really want is just the products delivered on time
and consistent
every time. What they measure you on is, are you delivering weekly the amount that needs to be delivered? And if you do that, they're very happy.
Yeah.
And if it's selling, well, even better.
Yeah.
It's all, as you know, is sell rate.
Yeah.
That's what they look at.
And was that, it kind of sold quite well, right? Otherwise you wouldn't be there 5 years on.
Yeah. Obviously start with those.
Because you would have had no marketing budget, I assume, or anything really to put behind it. So
had no budget.
You were kind of like, this is either going to sell or it's just not going to work.
Sell or flop.
Did they try and push you onto sale? So that your product was cheaper, or was none of that? They just put it in there and.
No, there's always been. Thankfully, craft beer has a certain price point.
Yeah.
So obviously we've been fully aware of that. You're not going to make your big money, your big net profit out of selling your product to supermarkets, but you are going to make some reasonable bottom line, but you're also going to get incredible exposure for doing that.
So when you've obviously got the product into supermarket and stuff, how are you getting the rest of your product out there? How did you do the logistics? Tell us a bit more about how that works.
So on the marketing side, because I think that's important to understand. At the beginning, we had no marketing budget, we had no marketing plan, and there was nothing. There was nothing. I came up with a crazy idea that I was going to convert a London black taxi into a mobile bar. I thought, well, nobody's done this before.
Yeah.
You can drive a London black taxi around, London, and you can stop anywhere and serve beer. The two things I didn't really appreciate was you can't just stop anywhere and serve beer. You need to have a license to do that. So
did you learn that from trying?
Well, in my naivety, I just thought, I'll go to a park and park up on a nice hot summer's day and start pouring some beer.
Yeah.
And obviously the local plod come along and say, well, what are you doing, sir? And I said, well, I'm
selling beer.
Would you like
one?
What's the issue?
Yeah.
And they said, well, have you got a license? I said, no. They said, well, you need a license to do that. I was like, right, well, that's a bit awkward. Well, you better be on your way then. And then another time I was on my way to a beer festival, and obviously with the London taxi, people are just desperate to get into, they just need a ride somewhere. And this woman hopped in and I was like, I'm really sorry, but I'm not a London taxi. She said, well, it looks like one. I'm running really late for my bikini wax. Can you take me there? I said, well, where is it?
Can you wax it for me? Yeah.
Anyway, moving on.
So you took her?
So I took her, and what else does a gentleman do?
What a gentleman.
Anyway, so you've just got to find ways to get the product out there, to market it. It doesn't matter how crazy they are.
But presumably, I guess what I'm trying to say is, at first you had a van, you were driving this stuff around to pubs, but at some point did that grow into something slightly more sophisticated, or did you kind of went down the supermarket route? I guess you were kind of doing so many different things, because I know at one point you were definitely brewing for one of the chains, weren't you? The restaurant chains, their brand of beer. And I remember that was quite hard work, because I think it was quite high volume and very little reward.
Yeah, so we did a number of kind of branded products for various restaurant chains, which was, that was fine for volume, but it's not getting your brand or product out there.
No. So I guess when your brewery's not at maximum capacity, but you're still having to pay everybody to come in and brew, it's quite helpful, because you're at least utilising their time and bringing more cash into the business.
Exactly.
And actually, they probably did pay more or less on time as well. So that was probably handy for a while.
I think you've got to kind of look at your sales channels and where you're saying and tailor your marketing or branding towards that. We did realise fairly quickly that we wanted to export the beer as well. That comes with its own challenges. One of them being that we'd realised far too late that we were not going to be able to get this beer to Sweden in time. So what did we do? We just put it in the back of the van and drove from London to Stockholm.
Love that.
Overnight.
Yeah.
And that took, I think, 22 hours non-stop driving to make sure the beer was at this festival, which was, horrendous. Obviously, you turn up at a festival absolutely knackered.
And then you've got to serve.
But, it's what you have to do.
Yeah, wow.
So that was
brutal.
Fairly brutal, yeah. You learn these things the hard way.
Yeah. I guess knowing all what you know now, because I feel a little bit like, very much about that when I started my new business recently. I'm often quite negative about my business Husk, and because that has been a real slog, and mostly not super rewarding, just a lot of things going wrong and not a huge amount of cash coming in. But you just learn so much from all these experiences. Like now I'm fairly sure, if the Swedish Beer Festival comes along, you've kind of got a bit more of a plan for that. But it's only really through going through these experiences and having to have these god-awful times, that we can do it better the next time.
Yeah, I think, that can be said with a lot of things, kind of. But I think
Sure.
particularly business. Ultimately, of course, nobody's ever faced any challenge like that unless you've worked in a particular industry for a very long time before you actually then start up whatever business it might be. We were obviously totally naive. I had no idea how to export beer to anywhere. Yeah, I had no idea. We were sent pallets of beer once to Singapore. Stupidly, I didn't put them in a refrigerated container.
Yeah.
So obviously they crossed the equator and all the beer exploded. So that was, what was that, £5,000 worth of beer. Yeah, and
you don't find out until it gets there, of course.
So it gets there, and the person who's taking it was like, "Well, what's going on here?" I said, I just had no idea. Of course, it sounds so obvious now. Of course, you should put it in a refrigerator container.
Well, listen, it's not obvious, because I remember the first time I packed nuts into plastic tubes, and I hadn't understood, that in these packs of nuts, just like packs of crisps, they flush them with nitrogen, because obviously the oxygen reacts with the food, so they flush them with nitrogen so that there's no reaction to the food and the food stays really fresh. And I had the same thing. 2 weeks after packing all these things by hand, they started to taste soft and a bit gross, and I was kind of in denial of it, but I knew, I was like, well, what's gone wrong here? But I think particularly when you're young, you're so desperate to get on with it and give something a go. You do make these slightly crazy mistakes. I guess it's probably quite annoying as well that maybe no one mentioned to you guys, have you thought about putting it in a refrigerated container? But I guess why would they?
Well, bear in mind, obviously, sending something in a refrigerated container all the way across the world is very expensive.
Yes.
And so
it might put you off.
So you think, well, it will be fine. And obviously, it's beer, it's just not going to be fine.
Yeah.
But I suppose that's an important point to touch on, is actually when you're running any business, starting a business, actually having somebody, not necessarily involved in the business day to day, but somebody you can reach out to who has some knowledge of that particular industry that you're working in.
Yeah.
That you can ask these questions to. We stupidly didn't have anybody like that, and that would have been incredibly helpful to have at the beginning.
Yeah.
However stupid the question may be, somebody's made that mistake before.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's why it is important to have, I think, have somebody you can reach out to and just say, how do I do this, or what's the best way of doing that, or who can I contact for this? Because
do you think because I know with me, when I first started getting into business, I was pretty headstrong and arrogant, and I wasn't a good listener, and I just wanted to get on and do it my way. And I think I would have just gone off and, well, I did many times go off and just go and do something, and then find out later that I went all the way around to get to here. And someone's like, no, you just literally step over here and you arrive. But it was just the way that I was. Was there a part between the two of you were you a bit proud, do you think, maybe? Or
well, I think that's an interesting point. Family dynamics in a business. So fundamentally, when we started this business, my brother and I were living together and working together. So obviously we realized quickly that we couldn't live together and work together on this business.
Yeah, no,
that is too much. And we are very different characters. So I suppose, when you're running a business, you've got to understand how to work with that other person. That takes time. And there were definitely moments where difficult decisions are not easy to make when you're both quite headstrong people. And you've got to listen to the other person's point of view, which we definitely weren't particularly good at the beginning.
Okay.
And you've got to learn to listen to other people, because fundamentally you never have all the answers.
But do you mean you weren't particularly good at listening to each other?
Particularly good at listening to each other,
Yeah.
But
that's a stressful dynamic. I had family involved in my nuts business originally, and I found I personally found it extremely high pressure, because I felt like everything had to work really well, because I wanted to prove. I was more concerned about proving a point to family than I was about for myself or anything else. And obviously there's so much personal stuff sort of built into all of that. So when you are having these conversations, decision making, but also money.
Yeah, I mean, money is
just it's a horrible. When everything's going well, it's very easy to talk about it and to ask for more, to expand and all these things. But it's much harder when you go and you start building a business, and then you go, right, it hasn't quite worked, and then you go back and you're like, but the thing is, we need more, because then we can. And they're like, well now this almost, it's like doubt is creeping in, and so then when it's family, that's.
Well, I think that's an important thing to touch on is, I mean, production businesses fundamentally require a lot of cash.
Yeah.
And as I said, we started with 300k.
Yeah.
I mean, that went fairly quickly.
I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of your finances, but £300,000 if you're going to set up a brewery, I'd imagine that is the absolute bare bones of what you need just to.
If the truth be told, we were really, really underfunded.
Yeah. Did you know that you were underfunded, or did you raise the 300k and think, brilliant, we've got all the money we need?
So we raised that 300k and we thought, this is great, this is all the money we're going to need. And and we just thought, well, we'll start selling beer, which we did. What we didn't appreciate was how much it costs to produce this beer.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
So how much does it cost to produce the beer? How much does it cost for all the staff? And it's very difficult to know that at the beginning. Instead of there being 3 of us, we're actually going to need 10 people. Well, that's a big cost.
How much of this had you done a business plan, and if you had, was it just pie in the sky?
Yeah, we'd done a pretty comprehensive business plan.
Okay, fine. So you see, you at least you thought it through, or at least what you thought it was going to cost.
So I was looking back at that business plan, and it was just so.
I bet you had loads of money coming in, didn't you, in your cash flow? From like month 3.
It looked so easy.
Yeah.
The reality is very, very different. But we in the first year we were selling beer. We were doing quite well.
Yeah.
The problem was that we were always making a loss, and the reason we were always making a loss was because our staff costs kept increasing. Producing beer in London is very expensive. Renting a premises in London is not cheap.
Mm.
And so I mean, if you want to talk about the real low points in business, I think it is very important.
Yeah.
Talk about those is when a business runs out of cash, it's a horrible feeling. I mean, it's
I feel like that's been the last 10 years of my life to some extent,
and you're thinking, well, that's the end.
Yeah.
And the worst thing is that you've taken money off people, and fundamentally they want to know what on earth is going on.
Yeah.
And
which is horrible.
So we had to go cap in hand to somebody. To keep the business going, we had to go cap in hand to somebody, and so we went to our mother. And obviously I won't go into details about exact numbers that we had to get, but I mean, it wasn't
£5.50.
It wasn't £5.50, and to put it bluntly, if the money didn't come in straight away,
kaput.
That was the end.
Yeah. So it's also an interesting situation, because you've got people that have put all this money in, and then they've also got to make the choice. It's a gamble, because they're like, do we lose everything that we put in, or do we put in just enough to mean that we can try and turn the tables, or is this okay? Now you've proved some sort of a concept. We're going to do a great big sort of ginormous raise. So okay, so you went to your mum.
So we went to our mother. Obviously, she helped out. Obviously, with various strings attached to that, but that kept the business afloat. And obviously, that meant that we could carry on trading into the new year. So that was 2019.
I remember this just before COVID.
Just before COVID, and then obviously COVID comes along, and you think, well, I mean, can it get any worse?
Wow.
I mean, the one good thing was that we had then had another moment 4 months later where Tesco, the only place we could sell beer during COVID was Tesco and online.
Because your online sales went up a lot. I mean, lots of people's did, but I remember at the time you telling me,
I mean, that went from 0 to 250,000.
Jeez.
I mean, that's incredible.
Wow.
And the Tesco, Tesco put in orders they didn't need to put in, and they changed their payment terms from 45 days to 15 days.
Why did they do that?
Because they realised that if they didn't do that, they were going to lose a lot of small businesses, small brands. And I think back then there was definitely a push to look after the small business.
Yeah.
I mean, they were incredible.
Go on, Tesco's.
So
because supermarkets get a bad rap, don't they?
I think they get a bad rap, but then they were amazing.
Wow.
So and then the online sales are incredible, but obviously that kind of peaks off after a while. People get bored fairly quickly of drinking beer at home. And COVID was brutal. I mean, we furloughed a lot of people.
Yeah,
we had to. The business just basically came down to 5 people, and that was it.
And also really difficult because, as I've seen with Husk, even when we were able to bring the business back to our customers being businesses, pubs, bars, whatever, they'd all suffered really badly as well. So a lot of them had either taken loans or couldn't continue, or whatever. So it wasn't even like apart from supermarkets and whatnot, your customer base was in particularly good shape either. So it was very much a sink or swim situation at that point, and I think a lot of businesses just went, I'm out.
Yeah, a lot of businesses held their hands up and just said, I can't do this.
Yeah,
which is totally fair enough. What we realised was that there was going to be an opportunity. So we'd literally just launched at that point our taproom in Bermondsey. So, I mean, again, terrible timing. But we'd launched our taproom in Bermondsey. And that, literally, the 3 months before COVID started, that was going great guns.
But I mean, that's been a pretty big success, hasn't it, for you? Because you speak very honestly and openly about where things perhaps haven't gone as you had dreamed that they might do. But that's worked really well.
So that's been a huge success.
It's the Barrel Project, right?
The Barrel Project
in Bermondsey. If you're in London and you want to go and have a good old knees up and a really good pint of beer, it's fantastic. I really recommend it. I've been there a number of times.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, that's been a real success. I mean, we realised that. I mean, how do big breweries make their money? They make their money from pubs.
Yeah.
So
a vehicle to sell their
product. Sell your own product in.
Yeah.
And thankfully, the Barrel Project worked from day one, and that was great.
Which is wild as well, because again, neither of you had been in that business either, and suddenly, no. Okay, so you're manufacturing, sales, marketing, accounts, all this stuff, and then you're like, oh, now we're going to open a bar, which is it's just a whole other thing altogether. So the fact that kind of just worked must have been a huge relief, and also just very, very rewarding for all the work that you'd put in and for all the stress that you'd been through up until that point.
Yeah, so I mean, that was kind of like the last roll of the dice, and if that hadn't worked, well, I think we would have just held our hands up and just said, it's just not for us.
Yeah.
So thankfully that worked, and that was great. And that took us kind of into 2019, and we realised that, like a lot of manufacturing businesses, we're going to have to raise more money. You always have to raise more money.
I'm amazed you didn't have to raise. I know you had to obviously go, like you said, with the cap out, but I'm amazed you hadn't raised anything more since 2013. That's 6 years, and you'd not gone bust. And obviously you had to go and get the but I mean, it's a tiny amount of money. Were you able to pay yourselves at all during that process, or just here and there? Or?
Here and there.
Yeah.
So that was. I mean, that's been hard. I mean, very hard. I mean, you don't make a lot of money out of brewing. That's for sure.
Yeah. But also, I mean, to your point on making losses, it's very common. I think if you probably were able to delve in, and interestingly, the government, as I understand it, is bringing in a new legislation, whatever you want to call it, that I think from next year, everyone has to file their profit and loss. Every limited company. So we're all going to see who's making losses and who's doing well and all the rest of it. And I think you'll probably find it's quite a few of the quiet companies no one's talking about that are making all the money, and the ones that are on the internet giving it all of that are making the massive losses. But certainly in food and drink, anybody that's in it knows that the vast majority of these businesses, 90% plus, are actually making a loss, which is quite hard for people, consumers, to understand this. But that's the brutal truth.
Well,
so you're kind of building a brand and a kind of almost like a beer empire or whatever, which ultimately, if you look at the cases of say Beavertown, which I think sold to Heineken, 36 odd million or whatever. I mean, that's kind of the game, right? That you're in. It's like, can I build something that I can then sell on a much higher value?
So we have actually pivoted. So 2019 we launched the Barrel Project, and that was great. That worked brilliant. And we pivoted the business slightly, realizing that the business has got to become profitable.
Yeah.
So a lot of these, I mean, most breweries, I mean, I would say 95% of breweries don't make any money at all.
Yeah. It's hard to get your head around it, isn't it?
Like, just to really understand that is really important. They don't make any money at all. I mean, we didn't make any money at all for the first 5 years of the business. And I think that is just so important to
well,
emphasize.
I think especially for because obviously people watching this that are thinking about starting their own business, and I always push people away from food and drink, but I think it's just because food and drink is brutal. It is.
Oh,
it is.
It's low margin and it's difficult.
I'm certain it's more brutal than most of the other industries, and I say that because obviously I've gone into this other retail product in gas, and I'm glad to say the margins are much better, and so I've seen it firsthand.
So you're you need to find an angle where you can actually make money and be cash flow positive.
Yeah.
And if you get a pub or a bar that works, then that is great.
And so was that profitable from the get-go? Because I know it's very profitable now, but was it...
From the very first
So you
day,
must have been like, I can't believe this.
Yeah,
what's this? What is this profit? What is this profit? That's,
well, we've never made a profit before.
No.
So actually to be making a profit was a great relief.
Yeah. And just good for your over sort of pride and sense of sort of overall being that you're like, actually... Because I bet...
Well, it's quite demoralising.
Yeah, I bet you really started to doubt yourself. Because, I mean, I certainly have at times.
I mean, it's demoralising. You think to yourself, well, is this ever going to work?
What's the point?
Yeah. And you hear about these successes in every industry. Beavertown obviously sold out to Heineken. But they're very, very rare.
And if you look at Brewdog's never made a profit.
Never made a profit,
as I understand it, anyway.
And there are 2,500 breweries in the UK.
Yeah,
2,500 breweries, and only 2 of them, or 3 of them, have actually sold out for a significant amount of money.
The craft breweries.
Yeah.
That's
2,500 craft breweries.
So your percentage chances are
extremely slim.
Yeah.
So then you've got to think, well, what can we do to make this business work? So we were like, well, bars, we know this bar in Bermondsey works. So why don't we just try and replicate that?
Yeah.
Like every other brewery has done since time immemorial, and let's try and do that, but do it well. And we know now how to brew good beer.
Yeah.
And we know that people come here and they enjoy the beer. So let's try and do that. So 10 years later, where we are now, the idea is to open some more bars, pubs, whatever you want to call them. And just going back, we raised £1 million. I mean, that's no small feat.
No, that really isn't.
I mean, to raise £1 million is difficult.
How did you? So this was just after you opened the taproom, was it?
So this was about 18 months. So just after COVID finished, basically.
How did you manage to do that?
Well, we realised we needed cash.
Yeah.
And we went out to people who fundamentally we didn't necessarily know, and we found a company that could help put us in touch with kind of high net worth people.
Yep.
And thankfully at that point we had a bit of a story to tell.
Yeah.
And the turnover then was 2.5 million or 2.8 million.
Wow. I didn't realise it was that high.
So it's not bad.
Yeah, so even if you're loss making, but you're a multi-million pound business, that's very credible.
Yeah, you've achieved something.
Yeah.
There's part of the business that is working. They can see that. That's great. So we proved that can work. So I mean, it wasn't easy. I mean, I've got to say, raising that kind of money, we looked at various kind of online platforms. But thankfully, we got a number of high net worth individuals and managed to
soldier through,
and here we are where we are now.
Wow. Okay.
So obviously a lot of that money tends to go on cash flow, but that'll help us grow to the next stage.
Okay, so talk a little bit about the next stage then. What at the moment, what is the future for the business, or what is the plan?
So obviously we have this place in Bermondsey. We're looking to open another 2 of those kind of the beginning of next year.
Wow. And have you found sites?
So we found sites.
Wow.
So in legals at the moment with those.
Okay.
So that's exciting. And then the idea is to so we've been we moved the brewery from London because brewing beer in London is very expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, just to understand how expensive it is, manufacturing anything in London. When we first started in 2013, we were paying £7 a square foot for our warehouse unit. That's a 3,500 square foot unit. We were paying £7 a foot.
Yeah.
We closed that site, and my brothers moved up to Norfolk, and so we're going to brew beer up there. But when we closed the site, the landlord was quoting £35.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Which, I mean, that just is uneconomical.
No, it doesn't even. Yeah. That doesn't make sense for anybody.
So obviously we were like, well, we need to brew beer out of London. Find somewhere much cheaper to brew the beer.
Yeah. And I guess in hindsight as well, like apart from being the London Beer Factory, but you could have called yourself anything. Really, where it's brewed is, I don't know how relevant it.
Well, you think Brewdog is brewed up in
Scotland,
or
everywhere,
North
probably.
Aberdeenshire.
Yeah.
I mean,
and also where labour is cheaper and everything else.
Yeah. I mean, you're crazy to brew beer in London. I mean, personally, that's my opinion, but I mean, if you're able to charge a vast amount of money for your beer, then great.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the idea is we're going to open 2 more tap rooms, and hopefully, in the next 2 years, get to 6 tap rooms.
And are they in London or
in London?
Wow.
Yeah.
So your journey, in many ways, is from sort of brewer to almost to restaurateur.
Yeah,
you
brewer
could almost
to landlord.
Say. Yeah, because you used the word pivot, and I think that's quite interesting because it was a similar journey for me because I started my my nuts business, Nut Shot, at a similar sort of time, and that ended up being a very different type of business to the business that I started because, like you, I'd kind of figured out, well, it was a similar journey in the sense that it was loss making. I was like, this is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
How am I going to turn it into a profitable business? And now it's a small but very profitable business, because it otherwise it has to stop.
Yeah, I mean, you can't carry on. There's just no point carrying on something that isn't working.
Yeah,
there's no point flogging a dead horse that's dead.
But I think as well, yeah, it's also hard because with all this stuff, you need to know. And it's one I spoke to Nick Stoop about his pension fund, but the business that he did before that, it's having the courage to accept that you've failed, and it's not always that you failed, but it's just this doesn't work, and I have to accept that, and I have to be brave enough to draw a line in the sand and go, okay, cool, we're now doing. In your instance, bars.
Yeah. Well, I think what's really important is to. The thing is, as a founder, you can get so involved in it's going to work, when actually you need to take a step back and just say, well, why is it not working? Where is it not working? What can we do to make it work?
Yeah.
And be brave enough to do that, because obviously the people who can't do that, I mean, that's why they die.
But also all of this while you're under the pressure of, running out of money, being involved with family, all these other things. So it is hard to actually make these decisions and actually to take action.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult. But when you look at the figures, the cold hard figures, and you're thinking, well, we're going to run out of cash in the next 2 months. What are we going to do to make this work?
Yeah, you still got to run the business.
Yeah.
While sorting out this, frankly, massive problem.
Yeah, and I also think unless you get to a point where it is working, then you just think to yourself, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? You know, I'm going in to do this thing that isn't working. And there's nothing more demoralizing than that, I mean, people, and obviously people do stick in a job that they don't like doing because they need the money. But
but that's very different, because if you're working in a job that you don't like doing and you're just getting paid, while you're sitting there getting paid, not enjoying your job, you're getting paid, and you can work out what you want to do.
Exactly.
Later on. But when it's your thing, and you put so much. Just of everything, of your heart, your soul, in your case, your own money even, into something, and then you need to understand when enough is enough. But it's a lovely story, because it looks like there's some real light at the end of the tunnel here, because I remember you saying to me it's like an extremely expensive MBA, but it kind of is in a way. But you looks like you've got a direction now, and that you've got something really good to kind of show for it.
Well, I think all businesses, or people who start businesses, having been in the industry before, I mean, I think they are basically an expensive MBA. But you have to go through these journeys. There are some businesses where it just works and it takes off, and that's great and that's brilliant, but they're few and far between. Yeah. Most people have a journey, and when they first start out to wherever it ends will just be completely different.
Yeah, I think when you go out and you start in business, I don't know, it's difficult because you don't want to put people off when they're confident and they're excited, but when you run into it kind of with that slightly naive sort of assumption that, your idea is great and everyone's going to love what you're doing, it makes it all the harder when you put your product out there, whether it's a beer or a stick of dynamite, whatever it is, and people go, yes, so what? Or, oh, actually, I don't like the way it tastes, or, it's exploding in the container, or whatever it is.
Well, you've got to have a thick skin, haven't you? Right?
Very.
I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to. I think being able to take criticism is important. And also the other really important thing that we learned early on was customer service.
In what way?
Well, I think in a competitive market, you've got to go above and beyond.
Yeah.
There were numerous times where we had pubs that were running out of beer. They're like, well, we need the beer right now. Yeah, it's Friday night. I was like, well, I'll get down to the brewery, put it in the back of my car,
and get it to you.
I'll drive it over to you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you got to do whatever it takes to keep your product out there.
Yeah.
Whether that's, you know, working Friday night, Saturday night, not going out. You know, it's just what you have to do.
Yeah, a lot of sacrifices to be made.
I think, yeah, with any business there is a lot of sacrifice. But yeah, you know, it's been an interesting journey, and a very valuable one. And thankfully, we're in a place right now where there's light at the end of the tunnel. I think it's definitely going to work. It's not been easy though, but I think it's important. It's important when you start a bit. I mean, nobody would ever start a business if they were always worried about this, that, and the other.
Yeah, of course.
So you need some naivety.
Yeah, of course, and that's why you have to be. I often say this: you have to be careful when people come to you with their idea, not to shoot it down, even if you do think it's crap. You have to listen and be empathetic and wish them the very best of luck, and just try to kind of politely, just, you know, I think the people I often feel for the most are quite often the ones that are telling me that they're leaving their very highly paid job in the city to go and start, you know, a new brand of coconut water or whatever it is. And I think, yeah. So this is a bit of a loaded question because we're probably coming gradually to the end now of our wonderful chat. I'm going to try and put you on the spot a bit here, but I guess if you did have to give a piece of advice to somebody who has no experience, that perhaps, and I'm sure there are many of you out there that would like to have a crack at this, because people are going to brew beer forever and ever. And at the moment, the boom is in low alcohol, right? Yeah. So there will be, but hopefully watching this, but there will be hundreds of people just in the UK alone, I'm sure, who are sitting there right now thinking about either quitting their job or, you know, whatever, investing their life savings into brewing beer. Is there one piece of advice that you could give to them? Anything sort of off the top of your head, which you just would be the one thing you'd sort of tell yourself from 10 years ago?
I think for us, I mean, thinking about it firstly from a brewing point of view, would have been just to really understand how important cash flow is in the business. I mean, with a production business, I mean, I just can't stress enough how important to understand that is, you know. And whatever you raise,
double it,
triple it. I mean, you know, you obviously you can't raise enough, but you know, always raise more than you think, and we just didn't have a good enough grasp on many things, but cash flow was one area that I just think, because you know, a lot of people don't really appreciate just how much cash you need to, one, get it off the ground, but the ongoing as well. I mean, I just think you look how many times Brewdog have raised money. I mean, I think they did it 7 or 8 times, and then they got money from private equity, and it's still not enough.
Yeah.
You know? So a production business just eats money. So I think understanding cash flow is probably the most important thing from a production business point of view.
Yeah, well, it's great advice, because I think that's obviously relevant with absolutely any business. It's not unique to this, but I do think that to really forward plan that, and I guess almost be very negative about you know, when you're doing your maths or whatever, about putting a 12 or 24 month projection and looking at what the absolute worst case scenario is, and then making it worse and saying, okay, let's start from there, and then hopefully any better than that is going to be a real bonus.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, because I mean, sure, anybody can go out and sell anything, but it's very easy to run out of cash, and then you've got nothing to sell. Great, you know. So I think that's the really, really important thing to hammer home, and that's from our journey, That's the one thing that we've learnt.
Cash is king.
Cash is king. Cash is definitely king.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that lovely little chat with Ed Cotton. Again, go and have a look at the London Beer Factory online. That's www.thelondonbeerfactory.com. If you're ever in Bermondsey, go and check out the Barrel Project, because you'll get a lovely little drop of beer there. And if you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, and we will see you on the next one.